Some stories don't start with explosions. They don't begin with screaming matches, slammed doors, or shocking confessions. Some stories begin with silence. The kind of silence that sits beside you on the couch, the kind that eats dinner with you, the kind that tucks itself into your marriage and waits. Before this story goes any further, pause for just a second. Subscribe to this channel. Not because this is entertainment, not because this is drama, but because what you hear here is real. These stories aren't written to distract you from your life. They exist to hold a mirror up to it. If you've ever felt unseen while standing right next to someone who promised to love you, if you've ever ignored that quiet voice inside because listening to it would change everything, if you've ever made a choice slowly, one small step at a time, only to wake up one day and realize there's no way back, this story is for you. Listen carefully. No one wakes up planning to destroy their life. No one looks in the mirror and decides, today I will become the villain in someone else's pain. It never happens like that. It happens on ordinary days, on quiet afternoons, on moments so small they don't feel dangerous, until they are. Life has a cruel way of disguising its most important turning points as routine. There's no warning, no dramatic music, no sign that says, this is the moment everything breaks. The day Ethan came back into my life felt exactly like that. Unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of day that dissolves into nothing by evening. Soft sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, catching dust in the air, making it look like time itself had slowed down. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. There's a difference. This was the silence of two people sharing a roof, but no longer sharing a life. My husband, Kareem, had already left for work. He always did. Early, precise, efficient, focused on everything except what lived between us. Over the years, his responsibilities had grown, or maybe they hadn't grown at all. Maybe they had simply replaced intimacy. That morning felt no different, except for one thing. Ethan was back. Ethan was Kareem's son from his first marriage, 25 years old, quiet, intelligent, observant in a way that made you feel like he noticed everything but chose his words carefully. He had returned after a breakup. Not the loud kind, not the kind that ends with accusations and slammed doors. The quiet kind, the kind that empties you slowly from the inside. Kareem mentioned it the way someone mentions the weather. Ethan's going to stay with us for a while, he said one morning, already scrolling through his phone. No discussion, no pause, no question, just a statement. And just like that, the balance of our home shifted. At first, everything was polite, too polite. Ethan and I moved around each other like strangers sharing borrowed space. Our conversations were brief, careful, neutral. There were boundaries everywhere, unspoken but firm. We both understood something without ever saying it out loud. Familiarity could be dangerous. He was respectful but distant. I was courteous but guarded. Peace, I learned, often survives on what remains unsaid. I told myself this was temporary, that he would heal, that he would leave, that nothing in my life would change. I was wrong. That afternoon, I was standing in my bedroom getting ready for another obligation Kareem insisted we attend, another appearance, another performance of a marriage that looked fine from the outside. Dresses were scattered across the bed. Each one felt wrong, too tight, too dull, too unfamiliar, like they belonged to a version of me I no longer recognized. Lost in thought, I didn't hear the door open. A voice cut through the silence. The word stopped halfway. I turned. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, caught in a moment that stretched longer than it should have. Confusion crossed his face, then embarrassment, then something dangerously close to panic. He turned away so fast he nearly lost his balance. I'm sorry, he muttered, already pulling the door shut. And just like that, it was over. Nothing scandalous happened, nothing intentional. Nothing that could be named or explained, but something shifted. I stood there, heart racing, my face burning, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. I told myself it was nothing. Deep down, I knew better. From that moment on, Ethan's presence felt heavier. Not threatening, just noticeable. I became aware of his footsteps in the hallway, his voice drifting from another room, the spaces he occupied, and I hated myself for noticing. I hated how something so small could disturb the fragile order I had carefully built around my life. Kareem noticed nothing. "Ethan needs time," he said one evening, barely looking up from his phone. "He'll stay as long as he needs." I nodded. I always nodded. Ethan, unlike his father, listened more than he spoke. Where Kareem filled silence with plans and obligations, Ethan respected it. Where Kareem spoke in absolutes, Ethan observed in questions. That difference mattered more than I wanted to admit. One night, Kareem worked late. Ethan and I ate dinner together for the first time. Halfway through the meal, he spoke quietly. "She left," he said. "No anger, no bitterness, no drama. She found someone else." I offered sympathy. He accepted it with tired gratitude. Something softened between us. After that night, conversation came easier, still careful, still restrained, but honest. We tried to avoid being alone together. We really did, but avoidance had a strange way of drawing attention to exactly what it hides. One evening, Kareem called again. "I'll be late." The house felt unnaturally quiet. Ethan sat on the couch flipping through channels. "Want to watch something?" he asked. We sat far apart. Then both our hands reached for the remote. They brushed. He pulled back instantly. "It's fine," I said. My voice betrayed me. Nothing happened, and yet everything had changed. Later that night, sleep refused to come. The house was dark, but my mind was restless. Thoughts circled endlessly, things I hadn't said, feelings I hadn't named, warnings I had ignored because acknowledging them would mean responsibility. I slipped out of bed and walked quietly to the kitchen, careful not to wake Kareem, though part of me wondered when he had stopped noticing my absence altogether. The light above the sink was on. Ethan stood there, staring into a mug of coffee gone cold, like he'd forgotten why he poured it in the first place. We startled each other slightly, then relaxed. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. He shook his head. We didn't talk about anything dangerous at first. We talked about exhaustion, about expectations, about how strange it feels to live a life designed by other people's decisions. Then, without looking at me, he asked something that cracked the floor beneath my feet. "Do you ever feel invisible in your own life?" The question didn't sound dramatic. It sounded tired. "Yes," I said. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. From that moment on, distance became harder to maintain. Not because we crossed lines, but because we kept walking right up to them and stopping over and over again, pretending restraint was the same thing as safety. There were shared laughs that lingered too long, conversations that stretched late into the night, glances that stayed a second longer than they should have. We never named it, and that was the most dangerous part. I told myself silence would protect us. I was wrong. The truth doesn't knock. It crashes. I felt it before I saw it, that pressure in the chest, that quiet instinct that says something is wrong even before your eyes confirm it. Kareem stood in the kitchen when I walked in. He wasn't shouting.